All righty. So World War II comes to an end, and the impact of the war on Georgia was, tremendous impact. The Great Depression ends because of World War II, primarily because of World War II. Georgia is booming economically during the war because of all of these military bases, because of the farming that has to be done in order to feed the nation and to feed the nation's army. The same thing happened during World War I, though, right? I mean, the economy of Georgia boomed during World War I. But what happened after the war? It went down. It decreased. The economy basically went bust. We're going to see that that does not happen after World War II. Georgia's economy, along with the economy of the rest of the nation, continues to grow. It continues to be strong. A lot of the things that we see that are developed during World War II, those technological innovations that we talked about, you did the timeline. A lot of those things go on to have some civilian applications. How many of you have a microwave oven in your house? You know where that came from? Some research that was being done during World War II, and a guy figured out that microwaves actually, you can cook with it. What?
You know, the first microwave was 6 foot tall.
It was huge.
It was popcorn.
It was huge. It was an expensive popcorn popper.
Sorry, I read that.
So, we begin to see a lot of innovation that comes out of the war that impacts not only the economy of the country, but it impacts Georgia's economy as well. One of the big things is television. Now, television wasn't developed during World War II. I mean, it was not, didn't have any defense application or anything like that. But again, there's research being done, electronics. And so after the war, televisions become more popular. There aren't very many stations. There's very little programming. But the use of TV expands during the 1950s. Three major networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. Of course, all three are around today. And you can add, I don't know, 100 more, maybe even more than that. If you have just basic cable, you get what, 100 channels? Something like that. You can watch television on your phone, right? So, we can see from the 1950s little bitty black and white televisions to today, where we have, 75, 80-inch LCD screens, 4K, 8K, just an incredible development that has taken place. Now, one of the things that this new technology does, this television does, is it feeds people's need for entertainment. During the Depression, people can't afford entertainment. But now, after the war, they have disposable income. What do people do when they have money? They spend it. They buy stuff. They even spend money on entertainment. And so people spent money on entertainment. Television comes along, and now they can be entertained where? In their house. Okay? They can see the Jack Benny show or whatever. I Love Lucy. They can see, today's stars in action on their television in their living room. And that changes America. That's one of the unexpected results. One of the unanticipated results of television is people stay home. How many of you have a television in your house? How many of you have two? How many of you have three? 4? 5?
Wait, let me work it out. We have 3.
Okay.
Does my phone count?
What?
No.
So you can see just by looking at your life today that technology has expanded. And one of the intended consequences is to provide entertainment, to provide news, One of the unintended consequences, if you've got 5 televisions in your house and you've got 5 people in your house, what might happen? No. You're going to be watching a TV, you're going to be watching one, you're going to be watching one, you're going to be watching one, and you're going to be watching one. Yeah. And that did. It impacted the American family. Whereas, before television, people sat around the dinner table and talked. They ate dinner together every night. The television, it took time, but the television, as we get into the 70s and the 80s, the 90s, people don't do things as a family. They would rather sit and be entertained. News became a big deal. Now, if President Biden falls down the steps of Air Force One this afternoon, when are we going to hear about it? Like 2 seconds after it happens, right? If President Eisenhower had fallen down the steps of Air Force One, when might we hear about it? Maybe later in the day, might not even hear about it. News has become instantaneous, and some of it is beneficial, some of it's not. Most of it's not, I think. But, there are things that happen. We need to be informed. We need to know what happened and how it happened and how it might impact us. So, new technology comes out. Not all of that technology is like the television. And we'll get into that in just a second. After World War II, we have what is called the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union, their relationship becomes very tense. Remember, we talked about Great Britain and how it was on the decline, and the Soviet Union and the United States were rising. Well, you're usually going to have one dominant person or one dominant country in this case. And so both are trying to dominate the other. Both are trying to spread their political ideology around the world. You see the cartoon down in the bottom. You have Premier Khrushchev and you have Jack Kennedy. What are they sitting upon? Nuclear weapons. What are their fingers poised over? The button, right? And the world is teetering on the brink of nuclear war, which would have been devastating. The world would not exist as you know it today. The only thing that kept it from happening is Russia knew if they sent theirs, we were going to send ours, and what would happen? Everybody dies. Right? Mad. Mutual assured destruction. So, relationships between the United States and the Soviet Union become really tense. And it becomes what we called a Cold War. If you like spies, if you like spy novels, if you like studying, then this is your kind of thing. It becomes a war of words and diplomacy. Who won the Cold War? The United States won the Cold War. Okay? Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. And how did it win the Cold War? By words. 2 things, 2 examples. And they're pretty modern examples. And they both have to do with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is giving a speech in West Berlin, which was Democratic. He's standing in front of the Berlin Wall that divided West Berlin from East Berlin. East Berlin's communist. And he addresses Premier Gorbachev. And he says, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. A couple of years later, the wall was torn down. But that's not really the thing that pushed the Soviet Union toward dissolution. In the mid to late 80s, the United States began to tell this story. It's an incredible story. And it centers around Star Wars. Not that Star Wars, but another kind of Star Wars. The United States let it slip that we had the ability to launch satellites into orbit that were actually armed and would have the capability of shooting down Soviet missiles if they were ever launched. Ronald Reagan sold that lie, and the Soviet Union believed it. And so the Soviet Union begins to dissolve, and it ends up dissolving during George Bush's administration. So the Cold War is not a shooting war. It's a war of words. It's a war of diplomacy. October of 1962, I was just a wee pup, a month old. 62. The Cuban Missile Crisis.